Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast. Today I am joined by A licensed coach JJ to tell you where Mohammed Kudus would fit into a Thomas Frank system and why Spurs are dropping potentially rumoured to be £60 million on the player. Kudus is a right-footed winger that everyone describes as dribbly in the simplest sense. He likes to run at his man. Very opposite profile to perhaps Brennan Johnson. But he's a left footer on the right. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you think he could fit into a Thomas Frank style setup?
Yeah, exactly that. So he is a classic inverted wide forward or winger, whatever you want to call him. He will play predominantly on the right-hand side, being a left footer, and that will give him options to come inside and to open up for shots and for little cut passes in through the channels. If you look at his heat map, I took a look at this for West Ham over the last couple of seasons. That is predominantly how he's been deployed, and it's where he's done some of his most exciting work. So isolating fullbacks, playing 1v1, and then because he's a left footer playing on the right, he's got the option of going outside and then driving in towards the near post. And then he's got options to shoot, to cut the ball across, or to pull the ball back. But he can also then go on the inside of a fullback. And because he provides that threat on both sides of his opposing defender, what he is doing and what he should be doing for us is drawing in other players. So he should be pulling centre halves over. He should be pulling defensive midfielders in to try and double up and to try and cover. He should be pulling back whoever's playing wide for the opposition to try and double up and to keep him quiet. He is a very, very strong runner. He's very dynamic. He's very explosive. I think one of the things that really makes him who he is as a take-on specialist is just how quick he is out of the blocks. It gives him a real advantage. And so hopefully, if you can get the ball up to him very quickly, so you can get it up to him before he's heavily covered, then you really allow him to do what he excels at. And that is to be unpredictable, to do whatever he feels at any given time. And that is going to require a lot of his teammates understanding him and reacting off that. But hopefully he's going to draw players towards him. He is going to be able to beat the first man without conceding possession, and then he's going to make the right decisions. And I think from what I've been watching on Kudus, this is the area that he really needs to improve. It's that final pass, and certainly he needs to improve the amount of goals that he's scoring now. That might be a relative thing. He's playing in a West Ham side that, particularly this last season gone, have struggled, but it definitely doesn't stop you from having output, because you only need to look on the other side of West Ham's team and you can see a player who's playing wide, who's doing very well and has better stats, so to speak, in terms of goals and assists. So he could certainly improve that side of his game for me.
Because that's the other thing. You mentioned there, West Ham in particular last season, they didn't have the best season. That's public knowledge. But Kudus has had better seasons in the past, right? He's scored 18 goals in a season for Ajax and 14 in the season before for West Ham. So some of this could be down to players he's playing around, right?
Yeah, it definitely could. We know there's an extremely talented individual in there. And I think you put him in a better performing team and in a better setup, he is going to raise his level. But there's by no means, he's only 24 years old. By no means is he the finished article. So you're looking for him over the next 2 to 3 seasons to really kick on. And you're going to want to see consistently being a threat to the opposition. You want him to be so hard to stop, particularly by the first player, because once you've broken that first line, broken past that first player, everything else opens up and you create a degree of chaos and a degree of movement in the opposition. And that's where the rest of the Tottenham team are going to look to benefit from it. So that's what we want to see, that level of consistency doing it. And as you've rightly said, he has shown he can score goals. He's got a great strike on him and he could also play in different areas. I don't think he will only play out wide, even though that's where he's been used most heavily. But he has been shown to play in a number 10 role in the past, where he's a much better player playing in another league with Ajax. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see him also generating chances from the centre of the area, which we know that Thomas Frank loves to create opportunities in high percentage chance positions.
So yeah, on that, with Thomas Frank and the way he likes to set up, from your analysis so far of him as a coach, is there similarities to Postecoglou's way in the sense that we saw a very familiar pattern, didn't we, for Spurs' goals last season, where it was those balls into Brennan Johnson or Brennan Johnson into someone else in the box, and we'd really bide our time for those high percentage high percentage goal scoring opportunities for the club. Do you think that's going to kind of be a similar setup then if we bring in someone like Kudus to try? Is he going to be more of a creator or more of a scorer, in your opinion, in that sense?
I think it's an interesting point. I think the area that I'd be most interested to see him in is as a creator for other people. I certainly would like to think that he could be someone that unlocks Solanke a little bit more than we have done last season under Postecoglou. But there's no reason whatsoever why we would stop. We've seen a great deal of the Brentford side where Mbeumo has been a beneficiary of really fast break attacks, playing skipping phases, getting the ball forward very, very quickly and trying to isolate a very good player against opposition and then get them scoring. There is absolutely no reason that if Kudus is the man that's been identified for Tottenham, there's no reason why he couldn't play a similar role for us. He could potentially move into the second striker role, which is what Mbeumo's done. He could play in that number 10 position and be a creator. But I think predominantly we're going to see him start off on the right of a 3, predominantly maybe in a 4-3-3 setup, and he's going to be a creator for other people. He's going to be driving on the outside. He's going to be creating space for fullbacks to get on underlaps and overlaps. He's also going to try and pin players back so that we can move midfielders into that half space that I've mentioned in other videos, where Thomas Frank loves to deliver crosses. He loves to get someone in that position just on the corner of the box so they can deliver really dangerous balls in. I think Kudus is the kind of player that pins the opposition back, so you can then very quickly just lay the ball back into a pocket of space for someone to deliver it.
The more you talk about him, the more I can see the value in having a player like that in the Tottenham squad, because Brennan Johnson has loads of strengths as a player, but he also has some gaps as a player that you're pretty much highlighting in the way you describe Kudus, pinning players back, running at players, driving at defenders, causing some chaos, but not quite having the end product at times. Whereas Brennan Johnson is often described as a player who doesn't run at players as often as maybe we'd like as fans, but his output is undeniable. You know, there's value there in all those goals he scores. So do you see it as depending on the type of game between Johnson and Kudus on the right, one will start? Or do you feel Kudus would come in and just be the starter and Johnson would come on as an alternative option later on in games?
I think I could definitely see that Kudus would be a very interesting player for Thomas Frank and potentially move into a starting position and be first choice, particularly playing out of the 4-3-3, which again, I'm hedging my bets here on Thomas Frank and thinking he's going to play that. He then walks in the door, and in the first couple of games, you see it's evident he's going with a 5 or whatever. But I do think that if he plays out of that 4-3-3, I do think Kudus is the player that will do more. He's also shown himself to be a willing runner. He will get back. He will press. He will counter press. He will do all the things that I think Thomas Frank is intending to do. So I don't think there's any reason why he wouldn't be the starter. But I just wonder whether Brennan Johnson's role then evolves and he becomes something else. We know that Thomas Frank was interested in Brennan Johnson at Brentford, and therefore I just wonder whether he's going to take him back to being a little more similar to the way that he was playing at Forest. And I think he might play wider. I think they might be putting the ball into space in front of him and trying to free him up that way and do, something slightly different than what he was being asked to do under Postecoglou. The other thing that I think is quite interesting between Kudus and Brennan Johnson is the two areas that Kudus really excels at, if you look at his stats on something like FBref, is as a take-on specialist, a 1v1 take-on specialist. He really is an elite player at that in terms of the top 5 leagues. But he's also got really high stats in terms of his pass completion, which means he doesn't concede possession a great deal. It means he's quite neat and tidy when he does offload the ball. Okay, and now that is super important. In that aspect, he's actually quite similar to Johnson. Johnson isn't profligate. He doesn't give the ball away a great deal, but Johnson absolutely does not take his man on, right? That is what everybody is crying out for in terms of his improvement and what he could do. So you could definitely see both of them being quite different and being utilised in different ways. And like I said, I just wonder whether Brennan Johnson is going to be used slightly differently. And there's a school of thought where Kudus plays off the left because he's perfectly capable of playing off the left if we want him to, and can be a winger, a straight out winger, and head for the byline. Johnson plays on the right, or Kudus plays in the 10. and Johnson plays on the right, maybe playing off a back five, so giving us a bit more stability with one of the midfielders dropping into that back four.
Well, this is key, isn't it? We've spoken about it in the past, but you often get these screenshots up on social media showing a squad and its depth, and you go, look, I've got 2 players in every position. We're set. But it doesn't really work like that. We saw it last season as Spurs. You can get 4 or 5 injuries in one position. So you need players who can accommodate multiple roles. So effectively, you might have 2 players in every position, but in reality, most of those players can cover at least 2 other positions as well. So you've actually got 3 players in every position. Then you've got other versatile options. And this is kind of leading on to another player we wanted to talk about today as a bit of a bonus at the end in Archie Gray, because you mentioned 5 at the back being another way in which Frank likes to play, but it's not the standard put a centre back there, is it? Midfielder / centre back kind of hybrid role, pushing up high when they need to and they need to chase a game, dropping back deep and covering. Is that where you see Archie Gray having a role in Thomas Frank's system next season?
I think it's very possible. I think, again, Archie Gray, we know that Archie Gray was almost there. He was almost over the line as a Brentford player, and we came in and gazumped them for his signature. So we know that they had been following him and they were planning to use him. And my assumption is that what they saw is a number 6 who might not be immediately ready to come in and dominate as a central defensive midfielder, but who has all of the qualities. He does have athleticism and he does have a good range of passing. So I just wondered whether they were going to deploy him dropping in, splitting the centre halves, dropping in to the middle of that, and then stitching the play together from almost like a deeper quarterback role, but also moving to either side, whether it's the left centre-back or the right centre-back side, and then looking to thread passes. So what you'll be looking for is that quite narrow midfield 3. If it's a 5-3-2, you'll be looking for that midfield 3 to get out of the passing lanes, really get out of the way, and then allow that quarterback, allow that, talented midfielder to pick passes through that kind of second or third phase to really move the ball quickly. So it's either, banging it into the striker who drops in to pick it up and then play the midfielders off, or it's to thread in attacking wing backs or to play in one of the wide forwards. So I'll be very interested to see if Thomas Frank does use Archie Gray in that way. And I certainly think he's got the skills to play it. What will be interesting is whether a season where he's had to do so much covering at centre-half under Postecoglou also stands Archie Gray in really good stead for the role that he's going to play if he finds himself defending in a back.
It reminds me a bit of the role that Eric Dyer was playing and why Thomas Tuchel signed Eric Dyer and the way Pochettino used him at Spurs. Is there similarities there then in some respect to Gray and Dyer's value in a squad to managers who have that 5 at the back part of their armoury?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for Tottenham fans, the last time that we really saw it in that manner with a midfielder dropping in was under Pochettino. He used Eric Dyer to great effect. We obviously had some really strong defensive midfielders and double pivots under Pochettino with players like Dembele and Wanyama, but Eric Dyer, the thing that he had is he had a range of passing. He was obviously strong in the tackle and was predominantly a defensive player, actually came in as a right back, but then ended up as a centre half. But we were going at times, we were trying to empty out the midfield, really move so we could allow our fantastic wing backs to get on. And one of the ways that we could have the solidity we needed with number 10s playing in front was allowing Eric Dyer to drop in. And he did have the passing to play through those channels in the midfield. And it was quite successful for us. I wouldn't say it was Pochettino's best system in terms of the way that we used it, but it certainly gave us a platform to play from in some games. And we might see something similar under Thomas Frank.
And just to finish it off, what kind of games do you think we'll see Thomas Frank deploying a 3 at the back versus a 5 at the back? As a coach, when do you, 4 at the back and a 5 at the back, when do you look to, is it simple as I'm playing a better side and I know I'm not going to dominate possession, I'm going to go 5 at the back and have the flexibility of that player to drop into midfield and come into defence. And then when I want to dominate a game, I'm going to go for the 4 at the back and try control the midfield. Is it as simple as that? Or are there games in which you'll think, why are we going 5 at the back? Burnley at home, what are we doing? Can you give us a bit of an explanation of that?
I think it's going to be quite nuanced. I think we should give Thomas Frank the credit that he deserves in terms of his tactical flexibility. He is a fantastic coach in terms of being able to put down multiple systems, and he can even use them within the very same game. But certainly he does a lot of kind of ID of the opposition and then set himself up to play in certain ways. I don't think it's going to be as simple as Man City are coming, we play a back five, or we're playing one of the promoted teams and we're going with a 4-3-3. I'm not sure it's going to be that binary. What I do think we're going to see is we're going to see a little bit of shifting around in games. You're going to see situations where a back four becomes a back five. So the idea of someone like the number 6, someone like an Archie Gray or any other player that's chosen to do it, dropping in to any of the 3 centre-back roles with a view to drawing players on, opening passing lanes, and then playing through the phases and trying to get the ball forward, whether that be quickly or whether it's been identified that the opposition are going to react a certain way, or whether it's been identified that the opposition, their midfielders are, or one of their midfielders is lazy and is not going to he's not going to react to this, and it could give us an advantage. I actually think it's going to be deployed during games at certain times. How quickly Thomas Frank can do that and can get that into his players will be something very interesting to see. And then, my feeling is that he's largely going to go with 4 at the back. That is, with the personnel we've got available at the minute, with the systems that they've played before Thomas Frank arrives, I do think he'll use that as a springboard, but I would not be at all surprised to see us using a back 5 in a game where we've ostensibly started with a 4.
You've spoken about this before, by the way, and I'll finish it off by kind of reiterating it. The understanding that as a coach, someone who works with players, remind you that you're working with humans here. These coaches have to train people, get these philosophies behind them, practice these ideas. It's not quite as simple as us going on the internet after a game and saying, should have done that. Well, that's all well and good, but when you're going through periods of a season where you're having 1 or 2 day breaks between games, you don't have much time on the training pitch. It's not quite as simple as, it's this team next, let's play like this. You've got to play with what your players understand. You've got to play with what your players know. You can't just simply instill it off day one. So it likely will be phased in over time. We see more formations and more ways we can grow under Thomas Frank. But like all managers, that's why they all need a bit of time, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, JJ. It's been brilliant as always, insightful as always, and up the Spurs.
Come on, Tottenham.